You know, every town has its treasures, right? Those special objects that seem to hold the collective memory of a place. But what happens when the stories we tell about them are more fiction than fact? Today, we're going to crack a code that's been hiding in plain sight for decades, a real mystery locked away in silver. So, take a look at this. This is the famous Broken Hill silver tree. For over 50 years, this thing has been celebrated as a completely priceless relic. It's a symbol of the town's founding, supposedly crafted from its very first silver. It's a huge deal, a cornerstone of civic pride, a treasure they say is beyond measure. Or is it? Because hidden right inside this beautiful, intricate design is a clue. And it's so obvious, but somehow completely overlooked. And this one little thing, well, it threatens to bring the entire story crashing down. Okay, so let's get right into it. To really crack this code, we first have to understand the official story. You know, the legend that an entire community has believed for decades. The official story, and you can see it detailed right there on the museum plaque, is pretty grand and very specific. It claims this piece, which they call an ear plunge, that's a fancy table centerpiece, was created way back in 1879 by a renowned Adelaide silversmith, a guy named Henry Steiner. And the story goes that it was then purchased by none other than Charles Rasp, the very man who discovered the silver that put Broken Hill on the map. And this belief is nothing new. I mean, as far back as 1946, newspapers were already calling it a priceless antique. The whole story is about foundational prestige. It's this perfect, direct link between the town's founder, its silver, and a master craftsman. It's the perfect origin story. Almost a little too perfect. But you know how it is with perfect stories. They can be pretty fragile. And in this case, the entire legend starts to get a little wobbly, all because of one tiny, totally out-of-place detail. Okay, I want you to look really closely at the boundary rider here. He's supposed to be Charles Rasp himself. Now, look at his horse. See how the legs are extended together in that fixed, kind of stiff gait? That's not a real horse. It's a rocking horse. And its style is pure 1940s, not the 1870s. This one, single anachronism, is the thread that when you pull it, unravels everything. And that's the truly fascinating part. For 50 years, thousands and thousands of people looked at this tree and never saw the flaw. But once it's pointed out to you, it is impossible to ignore. That single moment of dissonance, of seeing something that just shouldn't be there, is what kicked off this whole investigation. And this is where the official story really, really starts to crumble. When you start to line up the claims against the actual historical record, the whole thing just falls apart. So get this, the official story claims it was made in 1879 by Shiner, but the investigation found that Shiner sold his business in 1884. Then the story points to a 1936 auction from the Ricebath estate, but the item described in that auction notice is a different size, made from a different type of tree, and its figures are in high relief, not freestanding like these are. The facts just don't match the legend, not even close. And here's another fundamental problem. The museum calls it an epergane, which, remember, is a centerpiece designed to hold bowls for fruit or flowers. But just look at the silver tree. There's no place to put a bowl. There are no supports, no little arms, absolutely no way to actually hold a bowl. It's not an epergene at all. It's a statuette, a completely different kind of object. And this visual just makes the difference crystal clear. On the left, you have the silver tree. On the right, that is an authentic, verified Steiner epergane from 1878. Look at the top. The real Steiner piece has these elaborate, beautiful arms designed to hold 7 glass bowls. The silver tree has, well, it just has leaves. Functionally and artistically, they are worlds apart. Now let's zoom in on the craftsmanship itself. On the left is a figurine from the silver tree. Just note the style, the proportions. Now look at the one on the right, which is from a verified Steiner piece. The level of detail, the realism, the overall artistic quality, they're just not consistent. It strongly suggests they were made by completely different hands. So if the official story is wrong, what's the real one? Well, the evidence points to a completely different cast of characters, a much more recent creation, and a story built not by a master, but by a very clever marketer. Here's the new theory. It suggests that back in the 1880s, an apprentice silversmith named H.W. Bregeman created these little figurines, probably just as practice pieces. Decades later, in the 1940s, he assembled them all into the statuette we see today, adding contemporary elements like the rocking horse. Then, a really savvy retailer named Jack Wicks gets his hands on it and creates this brilliant marketing story, a fabricated rediscovery that links it to Raspensteiner. The story was so good that in 1975, the town council bought it, literally, and cemented the myth in silver. And you have to appreciate how clever that marketing was. The fabricated newspaper story that Wicks promoted describes the Boundary Rider's mount not as a rocking horse, but as a spirited horse. I mean, that's a masterful piece of spin, right? It's hiding the truth in plain sight with a wink and a nod. So this brings us to the biggest question of all. Why did this story stick for so long? Why did an entire town fail to see the rocking horse that was right there in front of them? The answer, I think, tells us a lot about the incredible power of a good story. This is what the philosopher of science Thomas Kuhn called a paradigm shift. For decades, the paradigm, the accepted reality, was priceless Steiner relic. Every piece of information was viewed through that lens. The rocking horse was there, but it was basically invisible because it didn't fit the accepted story. Seeing it required a complete and total shift in belief. And this pattern, a complete fabrication becoming accepted fact, it isn't unique. As a matter of fact, it follows the exact blueprint of one of the most famous literary hoaxes of all time. You might know this blueprint. Step 1 is the hoax. In the 1960s, a con man forges documents to invent a royal bloodline for himself. Step 2 is to present it as fact. In the 80s, a nonfiction book comes out that treats these forgeries as historical truth. And step 3 is the blockbuster. In 2003, Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code turns the whole theory into a global phenomenon. A lie repeated and repackaged becomes accepted as fact. The Silver Tree's journey is just a small-scale version of that exact same phenomenon. It started with Jack Wicks's clever marketing story. That was the hoax. Then it was repeated and accepted as non-fiction for decades. And finally, the town's purchase and celebration of the object turned it into a local blockbuster, a sacred, unquestioned truth. And that really brings us to the final, crucial question. The Silver Tree isn't just about silver or history. It's about how we believe what we believe. It forces us to ask ourselves, what treasured stories in our own lives, our families, or our communities are built on a flaw, a contradiction, a little rocking horse we've simply chosen not to see?